All right, so what we need to talk about is panning a little bit. And panning's a little bit different because it's going to utilize a slow shutter speed, but then also what we want to do is there needs to be movement happening. So as we have actual motion going, we need to follow that motion. So what we're going to be doing is taking the camera and we're going to be following the subject as they move across. So we're going to need to be doing this sort of a movement as we're taking the picture. So we're going to be moving and clicking as we shoot the picture. So as we get set up, the first thing we need to do is make sure we've got a good exposure. So we want a slow shutter speed. So what I'm going to do is I'm starting off with my ISO as low as it'll go. So I just set it to 32. And my shutter speed's at 25 or 24, something like that. And you can see I'm getting a pretty good exposure for inside the house, right? I don't have any lights on really in the house. There's just a couple of open windows, that are letting in some light. So what we want is to have our subject come across. They're just going to walk straight across. And then as we do it, we're going to take the picture. So go ahead and walk through. So direct your subject. They're going to walk through. And as they're walking, you're going to keep, taking the picture as they walk. So keep walking through. And just keep going back and forth. And, with this technique, you may have to shoot several times, right? It might be that, sometimes you're moving faster than the subject, sometimes the subject's moving faster than the camera, and we want there to be an optimal spot where they're kind of aligned, that the movement of the camera is the same speed as the movement of the subject, okay? Now, let's check those just really quick. So let's go ahead and look at those and see if we're starting to get a little bit of movement in those. We can see sometimes the subject's going to be sharper. Sometimes it's going to be a little bit, matching. Sometimes they're going to be off a little bit. So let's try a couple more. And we can adjust our settings just a little bit if we want. If we want a little bit more movement, we can also, slow that shutter speed down a little bit. So I'm going to bring this down. It's also going to brighten it because I can't decrease the ISO anymore. But let's try maybe a 15th of a second and see if we pick up a little bit more movement in the background. Okay, so go ahead and walk through there a few more times. So we're just trying to track the subject, keep them in the frame at the same time as we're moving the camera. And then, of course, it's going to depend if your person's running. That's going to be a way different speed that you're going to follow at. So you'll have to experiment a little bit with different shutter speeds and different movements until you get the correct amount. So the main thing with this is just keep shooting, keep trying stuff, experiment. Your lighting situation might be different, right? You might have to turn on some lights. You might have to open up, some of the blinds and experiment. But we need to get that slow shutter speed. We need to probably be at least the 25th of a second or slower. And if we have to adjust ISO up or down so you're getting the correct exposure once you have that shutter speed selected, do that. And just kind of experiment and try, shoot a bunch, because we need to get down to a couple that are going to be really good where both the subject is sharp, because the idea is that as we pan, we're tracking them at the same speed so they're sharp, but then also the background has movement and blur. And don't do it against a white wall, right? There's lots of things in the background over here, and that's going to help break up that space so we can see those trails of light as they start to move. So just experiment, try stuff, and let's see what you get.